So I'm also a special advisor at the Diversity Institute. So over the few minutes, I'm going to share my experience. And as a Black woman, I wanted to understand what happened to me, contrary to Anne-Marie. I went in deep in theory and to try to understand what happened to me. So it started like in 2017, in February 2017. I've been appointed as the president of the Human Rights Commission in Quebec. And it was one of my dream jobs, if we can say. It's become my nightmare. So a few weeks before I entered that position, already rumor was circulating, and as you know, rumor is part of mobbing. Rumor are circulating about me, about my competencies, about the fact that I was supposed to be a Black angry woman, or an angry Black woman, as you know. 5 months later, I was placed under an investigation by the Ombudsman of Quebec, named Protecteur du Citoyen. There was an anonymous complaint against me. And in August 2017, I became a very public person. My name was in the newspaper like almost every day for weeks, being a bad boss, being a bad person at the Human Rights Commission. There's a political context around it, but I don't want to get into it today because I will speak for hours. But you have to know that in Quebec, the question of systemic racism was not something that the population or the oppositional party were willing to listen to. So my mandate, that when I was appointed as a president, I was supposed to do a consultation, a broad consultation about systemic discrimination in Quebec. And at the same time, there was that consultation was going to craft Quebecers as racist people and stuff. So that was a bit of the background. In November, so there was an inquiry, a botched inquiry against me. And in November 2018, I resigned before I was impeached by the Parliament. 9 years later, meaning in April this year, a judge finally heard the case, and it came to the conclusion that the report of the Ombudsman Protecteur du Citoyen has to be void because it does not fulfill the principle of fundamental justice, meaning that I have not been heard by an impartial body, meaning that the ombudsman was not impartial. The thing, mobbing is something, and I won't say that it's something. But mobbing plus mobbing and lynching in the media, it's something else. Honestly, I don't know how I survived. I never thought of killing myself. But, people ask me sometimes, I'm sorry, I will go back to the theory very quickly. People can ask me sometimes how I survive. My answer is I don't know. It's me. I'm sorry. I don't know. But I survived. And it's probably because, I'm an immigrant in Canada, and my parents lived through the violence in 280, so we can come in Canada. So there's no way that their sacrifice will mean nothing. And that's probably what kept me alive and kept me straight into my boots. And that's why, I didn't cry a lot on that because my mother always, we don't cry at home. Because if we start, we will never stop. But, so, the argument is that mobbing is not personal, it's about like structural. And I think that we have discussed that a lot of time, and I think it's quite clear. So when we look at mobbing for Black women, we're talking about epistemic alienation, the process through which the cognitive capacity, the situate knowledge, the hermeneutical resources of structurally marginalized subject are actively destroyed by institutional, procedural, and discursive mechanism, affecting their standing as a credible knower, notably about their Black experience. The systematic process often institutionally orchestrate, meaning the ombudsman in my case, and socially reproduce the media in my case. So I was, we look at the news. I'm sorry, I didn't click that. So now you see like the event, as I told you, and the media lynching. I was like, and not a personal conflict, but a structural mechanism, as I told you. And did I skip one? Okay, so I told you that to be able to survive that, I look at different lenses to be able to understand what's happening to me. So I look at the notion of epistemic injustice. I look at the notion of the racial contract, the notion of intersectionality and misogyny noire, the notion of whiteness as a property, and the notion of racial cartel. So my lens is like looking at my experience as a Black person in leadership, experimenting, or like be not experimenting, that's not the right word, but be the target of mobbing in a white institution and in a space of whiteness. Because as you know, the leadership position, generally speaking, are position of whiteness, that there are white spaces where like minority, less often and minority women are not necessarily present as leader. So epistemic injustice, as you know, there's like two aspects of it. There's the aspect of testimonial, so you're not credible, and the aspect of hermeneutical, meaning that you doesn't have the fact to understand what's happening to you. So it's a bit like what Anne-Marie was saying. She was not able to understand what's happening to her because she didn't have the facts and there was no description of mobbing that she was able to capture, to understand what's happening. So she was, maybe there was a red flag, but she was not able to catch them because she doesn't have the hermeneutical knowledge to be able to catch them. So when you look at the racial contract, is that our social contract is not neutral. It's a racial contract because we are part of a society where some privilege have been given to some and not to others. And the notion of intersectionality, we won't go because it's a course on its own, but the notion also of misogyny noire, who is also an offset of the question of intersectionality. Whiteness of property, Harris has defined it very clearly. And when you look at position of power, you're looking at a kind of a property. For her, it's not, property is not like limited to tangible property, but also to the fact that you have access to power, some powerful element who are supposed to be given to the dominant group. And we look at the racial cartel, is that when you change the rule or you want to change the status quo, the mobber react like if you wanted to touch their, like, there's a link with whiteness as a property, that you want to touch the nature of like the system, how it functions. So you, like the cartel is reacting to push you out. And when you're talking about race, and I look at from the lens of race, and that's the concept that was developed by Rothmeyer, it's like, there's some position and there's spaces where Black people are not supposed to participate at the same level. And when I was talking to Giselle yesterday, I remember like that I use also in another paper the notion of, and you mentioned it this morning, Kenneth, about the notion of, it's Girard, the notion of scapegoating. So scapegoating and scapegoating is also part of the mobbing. And when you look at Girard theory, Girard, when he's talking about the mimetic theory that explains that mobbing and scapegoating are society's survival mechanism. So when we think that it's something that it's, not part of the structure, it's also part of the structure because group and society want to protect the status quo. So when you disturb that in any way, shape, or form, you're going to be put away to make sure, for example, and if you look at the notion of a moral, it's, for example, and I will take an example, people who looked at there was like a abuse of power or taking money to do other stuff that was not supposed to be done. And you say that the books are saying that you're supposed to denounce that, and everybody's supposed to following the rules. But there's some environment in the commission what I saw, and that's public because also I didn't say it. The court make a decision, but it's currently they're asking for like permission to appeal it. And they're also asking for a gag order, so I cannot speak about element of the file. So it's like very like when Anne-Marie talked about the fact that she was like this and like that, I'm a bit in the same situation. So I think that the scapegoating is part of like to try the system is try to maintaining itself and to try to not to resist change. And when you look at the question of of black women in leading an organization of human rights, it will normally, if the person is not a token, it will bring change. And sometimes people are not ready for that. And I negotiate the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Canada. So for me, the question of rights are fundamental. And though with that kind of background, I'm not the kind of person that they should have chosen if they didn't want change. I think that there was a misreading of my experience when they choose me, because for me, like, society in 2020, in the 21st century has to move so everybody can have a chance to move the needle, change, open the door to the others so that we can have like a real conversation. I think that what I'm saying today could be seen as very controversial at this point of time in this country. But, I think that human rights should mean something for everybody because if they're supposed to be right for everybody. So for me, it was very important. So the way that the machinery of seclusion, other than the other one that has been said already, controlling the image. So when you look at language like angry black woman, Jezebel, uppity, remember that Michelle Obama was treated as uppity, as to degrade her to a certain extent, is a filter through which you look at black women. Weaponized civility, the way you look at the tone of the person. You were talking about that, Anne-Marie, like the way you speak. And the tone, we forget about the context and the content of what you're saying, but the tone is not right, so it's a way to put you outside the circle. And the epistemic of ignorance, in Quebec, it's important to say that, as I said before, racism, systemic racism is not recognized, so it's a way to ignore the reality to be able to continue the status quo. So 6 minutes. Well, I talk about the fact that the rumor started before I arrived. I will go to the next slide. And also procedural gaslighting and double standard. So so when we talk about gaslighting, is that when, excuse me a sec, procedural gaslighting, so it's a formal, there's a formally neutral process that does the damage, what I call procedural gaslighting, neutral seeming bureaucracy that makes the target doubt their own perception of reality. it's a kind of the whistleblower law inverted in my case. Anonymity meant to shield the whistleblower instead shielding the mob. Conclusions were reached and shared with the Minister of Justice before I had the chance to speak. The court found grounds to, in his own word, reasonable question about the ombudsman motive. That procedural gaslighting is, in a miniature, is legitimate governance decision, the kind called strong leadership for anyone else, framed as abuse for a Black woman or for a woman. So I had the case study that I'm going to skip. It was like the comparison between clothing gay and my situation. It's on the deck. I had the Darvo also approach that has been my colleagues speak before about it, like the deny, attack, and reverse victim offender, like the tactic to make sure that you just flip the conversation. So you attack the person, but you deny that attack. And the racial cartel, which spoke about it. So the epistemic system, epistemic annihilation, there's how many minutes for? Okay. So first, Black women experience of a specific mobbing that I will call intersectional mobbing, a collective process of marginalization, harassment and exclusion that target the subjects precisely because of their intersectional position, and that aim ultimately to destroy not only the institutional presence, but their epistemic credibility. This organizational mobbing, reconceived as social murder by Eve Séguin, who presented last year, I think. Eve Séguin was saying, by definition, when she was talking about mobbing, you cannot survive your own murder. There's four features for me, like for the concept that I speak, as I name epistemic annihilation. It's coordinate, and after that it's progressive, it's institutional, and it's also epistemically total. It discredits the statement, but also the target entire account of what happened. And there's a study at the bottom of the slide. You can see that there's a study that has been done by Maureen Kane in Australia, and she interviewed more than 400 leaders she's talking about upward bullying instead of mobbing. But they say that the 71% of the senior leaders report personal experience of mobbing. 93% say it erodes their confidence and their willingness to lead, and we refer to the conversation that we just had with Anne-Marie. And only 18% trust their board that their board would back them if their own team target them. So for me, like looking at solution, I look at epistemic equity audit. Not only to see who's talking, why they're talking, and if there's any epistemic injustice that is occurring when you listen to them. There's a testimonial reparation, and this is a bit influenced by my work in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, like the formal acknowledgement of the story and the understanding of it. And the hermeneutical resources is, in the case of people of minority or Black people or Black women, to look at critical race theory to understand what's the reality of people that are on the margin, in the margin. 1 minute, so I think that I run fast. So I think it's important to say that's one thing that I say in the article of the Walrus, where I testified like 3 years ago, and the article is How Quebec Human Rights Commission Drove Out Its First Black President. I said, when you don't understand it's systemic, you think that you think it is because of you, your inability, your shortcoming. When you understand that it's part of a social dynamic, you get to look at your life differently, and it lets you live. Thank you.